Hello and welcome back to another episode of Andy's Bet Club podcast, the podcast where we look at the biggest games in Europe and bring you a four-leg bet builder for each game. As always, every episode is available on all podcast platforms and you can watch along on YouTube as well, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out. Today we are looking at Newcastle versus PSG in the Champions League this Wednesday, and as always on these podcasts we have two of Andy's Bet Club experts with us. This time joining us is Robin and Ramis once again. Fellas, how are you? Thank you for joining me. Did you enjoy the football over the weekend? Arsenal sadly let us down for our first episode bet builder. Robin, you predicted a pretty stale game actually, and we had quite the opposite, so I'll come to you first. Robin, what did you think of the big fixture over the weekend?
Yeah, you know what? I was waiting for you to come in and say this because I had really not played this game up at all, and obviously it turned out to be a thriller. What I would say in my defence is I think there was only 5 shots on target or 6 shots on target, and we got all these goals. So it was a thrilling match, of course, and it's thrown the title race wide open. So what more could you want?
Some absolute worldies as well from Patrick Dorgu. Patrick Dorgu's gone from this left back that struggled to play in Amarim 3 to now a left wing. I've seen comparisons this morning to Gareth Bale, which is I think a little bit outrageous and a little bit far-fetched. But listen, if he keeps scoring worldies and he keeps playing the way he's playing, then maybe that comparison might come more likely. Ramis, a huge game in the Champions League this Wednesday. A memorable game in the Champions League previously between these two saw Newcastle win 4-1 at St James's Park. Do you see something like that happening on Wednesday at the Parc des Princes, or could we get a different result?
I think it's going to be a really open game, to be fair. Obviously, PSG coming into it as the defending champions, but they haven't quite been playing in the same way that they were in the knockout stages to reach the final and then thump into Milan in the final. It's been a hit and miss sort of league phase. I think the recent games from PSG against Sporting and Athletic Club kind of show that. They've been dealing with injuries and absences all season. I think that's a result of what happened at the Club World Cup. Obviously got all the way to the final and they went deep in the Champions League, so there's a lot of fatigue there with their players. And then from Newcastle's point of view, I think this is a really real big opportunity for their season. Haven't been that good domestically, but as we've seen with most of the Premier League teams in the Champions League, they've been a level above the rest of the European competition. So I think this will be an open game, and I think Newcastle have a pretty decent chance.
Okay, it's interesting with PSG, isn't it? Because this time last year in the league phase, I'm sure they were really struggling to qualify. I think they nearly didn't qualify at all, and then, like we say, we went on to win it. And they're missing players like João Neves, who I think is so important in that midfield. But listen, a colossal Champions League fixture that I'm very much excited for. As always, Robin and Ramis have worked together to build this 4-leg bet builder, and you guys can follow along in the show notes. But we will come to that once we've built the bet builder. So first of all, Ramis, we're going to come to you. What is the first selection in this 4-leg bet builder?
So me and Robin have gone with over 2.5 goals, which is available at 1.45. PSG at the Parc des Princes usually are an entertaining watch. I mean, generally in the Champions League this season, 6 of their 7 games have seen 3 or more goals. The only game that didn't was that 0-0 draw against Athletic Club I mentioned in the intro, and that was a game where PSG really should have taken more of their chances. They're next year of 2.22, and I think if they get a few goals there, they probably cover that goal line as well. This goal line has landed in all 3 of their games at the Parc des Princes. They've also played English opposition in that time as well. They beat Tottenham 5-3, and I could see this game going in a similar sort of format. Newcastle as well have seen 3+ goals in 6 of their 7 Champions League games, coming off a disappointing result at the weekend against Villa. I think it's a massive game for Eddie Howe, but if you do look at Eddie Howe's record in these sort of big games, big moments, he usually sets up the side very well. So I think it's perfectly set up for a high-scoring game. Both of these teams are level on points in the league phase, and they've also got the exact same goal difference. So it's all to play for. It's basically a straight shootout for the top 8. So I can't really see either team being too pragmatic.
Okay, I mean, interestingly, PSG have sort of been a bit wasteful in front of goal in the UEFA Champions League this season. I think they've scored 1 in their last 2. They only scored 1 in their fixture on Friday night in the Ligue 1 as well. Are you not worried that might not add much to the selection from PSG's point of view? So why do you think that in this game specifically that might change and and we get a bit of a goal scoring game?
Well, I think the format of the league phase has really kind of lent itself to more high scoring, more entertaining games, because a draw doesn't really get you too much, especially on the final match day. Last season on the final match day, there were only 2 draws out of the 18 games, so there is a willingness for sides to kind of go for the result, go for the victory. Also, last season in the Champions League on the final day, there was an average of 3.5 match goals per game. In the Champions League generally this season, we're seeing an average of 3.39 match goals per game. So it is the competition for goals. And, credit to the new format, it does make it a lot more exciting.
Okay, awesome. Just before we move to the second selection, Ramis, I've got to ask you, you've got a PSG shirt on, my man. I thought you were a Chelsea fan, but I'm not for sure. Maybe in that Club World Cup final, you were just happy whatever happened? Is that the case?
Well,
or
I actually bought this after the Club World Cup final, because going into it, everybody was telling us how we were going to get smashed, how we were going to get battered. I've got Doué on the back as well, who was meant to tear us apart. But I thought, just a little collector's item. I thought I'd wear it for the occasion,
So you did it in honour of Chelsea winning. You bought the team that they beat jersey. It's a new one for me, Ramis. But listen, each to their own. Do what you want to do. Robin, we're going to come to you, my man. What is the second leg for the bet builder?
Yeah, so our second leg is going to be for Anthony Gordon to have 1 or more shots on target. Now, that is available at 1.8 free. He's had 7 shots on target in the Champions League so far in 6 of his 7 games. And that equates to 1.19 per 90 minutes, which is second at Newcastle behind only Harvey Barnes. He's also got an exceptionally high shot count, so it's not as if he's just hitting the target with every effort he has. A high shot count obviously gives him more opportunities to hit the target. He's had 16 and 7 games for Newcastle in the Champions League this season, and I just think that the way this match is set up suggests that he's got every chance of posing PSG some real problems in this game. PSG are going to play with a really high defensive line, you'd imagine. Newcastle have got bags and bags of pace on the counter-attack, and I think that sets up very well for Anthony Gordon to shine in Europe once again.
You mentioned his form of shots on target in Europe being quite high, but in his last sort of 4 games in the league and other competitions, he's only had 1 shot on target in the last 4. Newcastle fans are becoming very frustrated with him. He's getting a lot of stick on football Twitter for, first of all, his trim, and then second of all, the way he's playing as well. What I know, obviously, the form in the Champions League is the main factor here, but is there anything else that makes you sort of more confident?
For me, it's really just this whole idea of PSG having this hugely high defensive line. They do get caught in the break. They have a real tendency to get caught in the break. They were threatened by Auxerre at the weekend. They played on Friday. Auxerre caused them problems in the break, and with all due respect to Auxerre, they're nowhere near in the same league as Newcastle. So if a mediocre Ligue 1 team can pose them problems, then you would expect a high quality player, even one that's out of form like Anthony Gordon, to equally cause them some headaches.
Awesome. Okay, perfect. Ramis, we're going to come back to you, my man. What's the third selection for the bet builder?
So we've gone with Sandro Tonali to commit 1 or more fouls at 1.36. He's committed 10 fouls across his 6 starts in Champions League this season. Works out to about 1.67 per 90. That's actually up on his foul record in the Premier League, which is 0.91 per 90. So a slight increase in the Champions League. There's a few reasons for that. I feel like Newcastle get a bit more involved in the physical intense side of the game when they're playing in the Champions League, because that's their main sort of advantage here. And if PSG don't have their usual players in midfield, I think that could be a good advantage for them. Also, I think if you look at the prices, the other Newcastle midfielders, I mean, Guimaraes is a real doubt for this game. He missed the game against Villa, and that would be a massive miss for Newcastle because he's been their best player this season by some distance. So it'd probably be Tonali, Joe Linton, and then Miley next to him. Miley doesn't have a great foul record, and Joe Linton is always very, very shortly priced for fouls. So Tonali is kind of a good middle ground. You can come to at 1.36 in the Newcastle midfield, even though that PSG don't have their normal midfield setup, which was so effective last season, and then winning Champions League. They still play with a very intense counter press, no matter who's in there in the middle of the park. Luis Enrique wants them to play in a kind of similar way, and I can see them getting into the midfield battle with Newcastle quite a lot here.
Obviously, they've had Mayulu as well, PSG, who I think is one of their most fouled players in the midfield in the Champions League so far this season. Potentially, he could miss out, and Zaire Emery come back into that midfield role. Is that a worry, or do you think Zaire Emery, if he does do that, listen, it's all if buts and maybes at the moment, but if he does do that, that he might not get as many fouls as maybe Mayulu would or Vitinha or whoever else will be in that midfield?
Yeah, I think ideally you'd want Mayulu in there. Sometimes Doué also drops back into the midfield. I think that would be great for our selection here because he'd be right up against Tonali. But either way, I think with PSG, the system is king. It's about how they set up more so than the individual players. Obviously, a lot of people focus on their attack. But for me, last season, their midfield was the reason that they were so successful. Vitinha, Neves and Ruiz. But it was more the system that Enrique had them playing in. They didn't give teams any space, especially at the Parc des Princes. So I could see Tonali having quite a lot of work to get through, especially if Enrique goes with Emery in there, two more attacking-minded players. If he wants to take the game to Newcastle, I can see him having a lot to do.
Okay, awesome. And then the final selection, Robin, we're going to come back to you, my man. What is the final selection for this Bet Builder on Wednesday night?
So we are sticking on fouls here, and it's another Newcastle player. It's Kieran Trippier to have 1+ fouls at 1.25. And he's going to be severely tested in this game, you would imagine, because of the quality that PSG have out wide. I think Desiree Doué will probably play out there. He's been fouled 21 times in all competitions this season at 1.93 per 90 minutes. And also working that left flank for PSG is going to be Nuno Mendes. He was rested at the weekend, so he should be coming back in fully fit and firing. He's been fouled 32 times in all competitions at 1.85 per 90. So it's going to be a real workout for the veteran. He's not committed a foul in his last two, I have to point out, but prior to that he had committed at least one foul in 11 straight games. So you imagine that he is going to be a player that PSG are going to really try to test down that flank, and their quality out wide and their willingness to get into these wide areas and to try and beat a player you'd imagine is going to draw at least one mistake from Trippier at some point in this match. And I think that's why we think it's a really nice bet.
You mentioned Doué there, potentially being the one to start on the left wing. He's from the last recent sort of games, he's been sort of switching between the left and the right. Also on that left wing, you've got the likes of Kvaratskhelia, who we all know how nippy and naughty that man is. I think you'd have absolute nightmares the night before if you knew you were coming up against him. You've got Barcola as well, who's really coming into sort of his own. If Doué isn't the one on that left wing, out of those two other players, who do you think is more likely to win the fouls?
I don't think it really makes a whole heap of difference who PSG have in that area because, as Ramis said, they've got so many players who are so technically strong, who are willing to dribble at opponents and are willing to commit opponents to making fouls and to really try and take them on. So, you know, you can see Trippier getting beaten at some stage and just having a pull or a wee trip. So I think it's a really nice bet and a really nice price at 1.25.
Awesome. Okay, perfect. So just to recap, our 4 legs for the Bet Builder are over 2.5 goals at 1.45. We've got Anthony Gordon 1+ shot on target at 1.83. Sandro Tonali 1+ fouls committed at 1.36. And Kieran Trippier 1 fouls committed at 1.25. Combined odds are 3.86. Just before I move on, fellas, I'm going to grab a score prediction from you for this game. Ramis, will come to you first. Obviously, your beloved PSG. I know you really want them to do well. With the shirt on, so what do you think the score's going to be?
I think Newcastle. I think Newcastle will get their revenge from what happened last time. You remember when they went to the Parc des Princes and they had the thing with the penalty. I think they'll get their revenge. I think it'll be 3-2 Newcastle. Gordon brace.
Wow, you're not even backing your own team. Interesting. Okay, Robin, what about you, mate? What's score prediction for you?
Yeah, I mean, having said there's going to be no chance of a draw, I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw.
Okay, mental. But I love it, fellas. Thank you. As always on this podcast, you guys watching and listening can back the bet by going in the description, the show notes. The bet will be there. You can go over to andysbetclub.co.uk and it will load up for you. We are backing it with Paddy Power. And just to make you aware, you have to be over 18 and please do gamble responsibly. If you don't want to follow this exact bet builder, you can also head over to andysbetclub.co.uk and there's a load of free Bet Builder stats at your disposal. By far, for me, the most exciting Champions League fixture this week. Will Newcastle provide a similar result to what they did at St James's Park? There's obviously revenge there that Ramis has just touched on from the last fixture at Parc des Princes. Or will the reigning champions of Europe just prove to be a little bit too much for them? Thank you for tuning in, folks, once again. As always, make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you're not missing any more episodes. We are previewing Newcastle again on Friday for their fixture against Liverpool at the weekend. But until then, take care, have a lovely week, and we will see you all very, very soon.